Bible has been a staple First Communion gift for decades. I received one at my First Communion. I gave one to folks for their First Communion, and just the other day I was visiting a family and they had one, a gift from their son's recent First Communion. It's been around forever, and the premise is simple. It's the major parables and stories of the Bible in narrative form, and there's an illustration at the beginning of each one. And this picture Bible has immense power. The reason why it has immense power is because for decades, those illustrations have really shaped the way we think about each of these narratives. It's our first visualization of what this narrative might look like, and it sort of sticks with us, even subconsciously, well into adulthood. I know this because it's certainly the case for me, and it's the case for me with respect to this parable. In that Bible, the illustration for this parable is a man dressed very finely in what is essentially one massive room, dining room. His whole house appears to be one dining room. And at the door, kind of staring into the rich man, is Lazarus, covered in sores with the dogs. And that's kind of the way I have envisioned this story for many, many years. And I think it's the way many of us envision this story. That the point of the parable is like this malicious greed, this malicious wealth, that somehow in the face of the poor Lazarus, this rich man is just stuffing his face and gorging himself, almost taunting Lazarus for his plight. But friends, that visualization, while certainly the message is true and we should not do those things, the visualization is perhaps a little unhelpful. The way a house was laid out in that time, Lazarus was at the gate. There would have been a significant courtyard between the gate and the entrance to the building. There would have been a number of rooms and then a dining room. It's not as if Lazarus is peering in, watching this man eat every single day. But more likely, this man would have passed Lazarus going in and out to his place of business or work. Lazarus would have been just another person on the street lying at his door, someone easy to walk by in the midst of the many cares and concerns of the world that we all carry and bear. That visualization, that understanding changes the way we think about our parable just a bit. Because it means that what it cautions us against is not malicious greed, though that's bad. Perhaps what it's cautioning us against is the sort of indifference and complacency that can settle into us as Christians that allows us to walk by the needy, the poor, the destitute without much thought, without much concern, without much care. And friends, if that's the message of today's gospel, that's far more convicting for us. Because the reality is, none of us are particularly generally in the malicious sort. We don't really seek to antagonize others, though if you do, you should probably stop. But many of us do fall into the second category. In fact, it's human nature for us to fall into the second category. We get distracted by the 52 things we're thinking about each day. Whether I left the stove on when I left the house, what I need to do at work when I get there, who I'm going to run into, what I need to say, which emails I need to send, what I need to study for. It's easy for us to be so consumed by these things, the day-to-day minutia of life, that we become blind to the presence of God around us. Particularly the presence of God in the poor, the needy, the destitute, the outcast, the forgotten. Like the rich man, we too can walk by any number of people each day as if they're just parts of the landscape around us, like a tree or a bench or a trash can. They're just part of the scenery of our day-to-day life. And when they blend in and fall into the scenery of our life, they become less human. They become objects, not persons. And so, friends, it's perhaps notable that in all of the parables given to us in the gospel, in all the stories that Jesus shares with us to teach us something, Lazarus is the only person in any one of those that has a name. As if to remind us that he has a name. That though to the rich man who walked past him each day, he was simply part of the landscape, to God, he was known by name and loved by name. To God, he was Lazarus. And so, friends, perhaps what the Lord considers us or invites us to consider this morning is who are the nameless in our life? Who are those people that have simply vanished into the landscape of our day-to-day existence that God might be calling us to be a little bit more attentive to? It's the person who's asking for money on the street corner. It's the person who perhaps cleans our bathrooms and hallways in the hall. It's the person who we see each morning on the way to work. The person we pass by in the hall every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but have never bothered to know their name or learn their name. Perhaps it's broader. Perhaps it is the poor, the destitute, the immigrant and migrant, the unborn. Whose dignity in our life is not on our radar? How are we becoming complacent in the life that Christ invites us to and calls us to? And with that reflection, God shakes us out of our complacency and says, I am calling you closer to me. I am inviting you to share in my life and in my love. And the way we do that is by sharing that life and that love with others, especially the ones who are so easily forgotten. And so, friends, as we gather for Eucharist this morning, as we seek to share and to receive the very bread of life, our Lord himself, may our desire simply be to find and think of those folks in our life for whom God is calling us to share, to whom God is calling us to share this gift with. Doesn't mean you have to empty your bank account and give it to the first guy you see on the street. It doesn't mean you have to uproot your entire life and spend 18 hours in adoration a day. It doesn't mean you have to spend 22 hours making new friends. What it does mean is we should look at the people around us perhaps a bit more thoughtfully, with a bit more consideration, so that we might see our God present in them, and with them seek to journey together to the kingdom of heaven.